Welcome to Revolutionize Your Retirement Radio, bringing you insights and strategies to help you create a magnificent and fulfilling second half of life. Here's your host, certified professional retirement coach and best-selling author, Dr. Dorian Mintzer.
I want to welcome everybody to this fourth Tuesday Revolutionize Your Retirement Interview with Experts series. I'm Dorian Mintzer, your host and owner of Revolutionize Retirement. So I am so delighted to have Dr. Ken Dykewald as my guest today. I actually first heard Ken speak, I think it was in 2011, and I kind of remember this stark speech where he said, look around the room and one out of every two of you is going to end up having Alzheimer's. And I remember just like, oh, wow. And here we are in 2020. I also had, I mentioned this to Ken, that you never want to give a speech after Ken talks, and you'll sort of see he's a master. Unfortunately, I once gave a talk that followed him, and it's not good for the self-esteem, I have to tell you. It's very hard to follow Ken Dykewald. Ken is just a fabulous person. Over the past 40-plus years, he's emerged as North America's foremost visionary and original thinker regarding the lifestyle, marketing, healthcare, economic, and workforce implications of the age wave. He's a psychologist, gerontologist, best-selling author of 17 books on aging-related issues, and his work is phenomenal and has been over the years. And he also, actually, with his wife Batty, wrote a children's book, which I have not read yet, but I now am aware of it, and I look forward to reading that. His new book, which has just come out, and we timed, this July call to hopefully be part of this wonderful book launch, is called What Retirees Want, A Holistic View of Life's Third Age. And it was co-authored with Robert Morrison. I've finished reading it now, and I can tell you it's a phenomenal book. It's a book that I recommend for everybody, whether you're a pre-retiree, a retiree, in the financial services, a marketing person, entrepreneur. He approaches things in a very full, robust and challenging way to really get yourself thinking about, what it is that retirees want. Since 1986, Ken has been the founder and CEO of AgeWave, a firm he created to guide companies and government groups in product service development for boomers and mature adults. His client list has included over half of the Fortune 500 companies. He served as a fellow of the World Economic Forum and was a featured speaker at 2 White House conferences on aging. He twice received the Distinguished American Society on Aging Award for Outstanding National Leadership, and American Demographic honored him as the single most influential marketer to baby boomers over the past quarter century. His article in the Harvard Business Review, It's Time to Retire Retirement, was awarded the prestigious Mackenzie Award, tying for first place with the legendary Peter Drucker. He was honored by Investment Advisor as one of the 35 most influential thought leaders in the financial services industry. And over the past 35 years, Ken and his wife Maddie recently received the Esalen Prize for their outstanding contributions to advancing the human potential of aging men and women worldwide. In 2018, he was awarded the Inspire Award from the International Council on Active Aging for his exceptional and lasting contributions to active aging industry and for his efforts to make a difference in the lives of older adults globally. During his career, he's addressed more than 2 million people worldwide in his speeches to corporate, associations, social service, government groups. He has been really accurate in his predictions of ideas that really we're seeing emerge. And he's been featured so much of both print and electronic media worldwide. And he's just an amazing person. So I'm just really pleased you're here with us, Ken. And I look forward to, I struggled. There's so much stuff in the book, and they're wonderful concepts to both think about, but you also write in such a terrific way where Ken has this really wonderful ability to not just lump everybody together. So this book really is about what retirees want. And, he talks about sort of looking at people and the trends and the patterns so that we really understand some of the differences in this group. It's not a homogenous boomers group. So I think I've gone on enough with talking about you. So now, Ken, why this book and now? I mean, I sort of wanted to start with that and just welcome you to be our guest today.
Well, first of all, thanks so much, Dory, for having me on and for that incredible biography that you've told there. Of course, you didn't mention all of my confusions and failures and screw-ups and mistakes, but it's nice to see the greatest hits there. Thank you so much. Why this book now? You know, I've, as you mentioned, it's my 17th book, but I wrote my very first book, a book called Body Mind, when I was kind of a hippie yoga teacher living in Big Sur when I was 22. And I've always been writing a book throughout my life, but this is my first book in over 10 years. I just felt kind of tired of books, and I felt kind of tired of the effort and tired of the drama and tired of the disappointment that, you know, your friends don't read it and, you know, all that kind of stuff. And, but I just felt that it was really important that there was so much confusion about who older adults were. And with my own generation, with the boomers being the new kind of cohort in, knowing that we were going to change it all, that whatever people thought seniors or retirement or maturity used to be, you know, scrap it because there's a whole new model emerging. And also I had the benefit. We've been involved in a number of very, very expansive studies over, we being AgeWise, my company, over the past decade. And we literally have just finished spending 70,000 hours of time of economists and sociologists and gerontologists and home care professionals and nurses and doctors and kind of everyone you can imagine. We did all these surveys in both the United States and in 20 countries around the world, and it gave us kind of the ability to have real-time insights that nobody else had. And I will tell you that when we tried to get a publisher at first, we wanted the book to be kind of holistic. And publishers said, no, people can't track that. Why don't you do a study about the future of retirement when it comes to finances? Someone else said, why don't you do the future of retirement when it comes to leisure? Somebody else says, oh, you should do the future of retirement family. And we said, no, we want to do the whole thing. That if you look at a person's life, it's not all divided up like that. I mean, it's not in sectors. You know, I've got my relationship with my kids and my wife and our finances and our health. They're all kind of tied up together. So our goal was to craft a book that would be both high-powered in terms of academic research, you know, full-on, highly credible, smart research, but also display the possibilities of what's emerging in all these different aspects of people's lives with this new longevity, and even rewrite the whole notion of retirement. And also, frankly, we had a split audience. Those of you who have written or done any kind of media work, you know, the big question is always, who's your audience? You know, is it school teachers? Is it financial advisors? Is it, you know, self-help seekers? And we initially thought we'd write the book for people in business because business is so upside down and confused regarding older adults. But then as we were writing it, we thought, you know, really isn't a single great book for people who might be 40 or 60 or 90 wondering, hey, what am I going to do with the rest of my life? And so we tried to do a book kind of for everyone. And we'll see. You know, it's only been out a week and a half, and as you and I were talking before this call started, you know, when you launch a book, you never know what it's going to be. You know, so I've done books that have totally flopped and others that have been bestsellers, but this one went into its second printing after 4 days. And so that's never happened to me before. So I think we might have hit a nerve. And, you know, all of my earnings from this book, I'm donating to the American Society on Aging, a professional association that I've been very fortunate to have been supported by for many years. And they gave me a lot of breaks in my career. So this is not about, oh, boy, I'm going to make money on this book. It's really more I really want to kind of turn the wheel and get everybody up a couple of ticks with regard to understanding this new stage of life.
And that's such a beautiful example of what part of your book's about, which is the, you know, that idea of giving back and that idea of making a difference. And I think that's so lovely of you. I actually heard the webinar when you were mentioned that at the ASA, and it was just it's just so generous of you to do that.
Before we all get carried away with what a nice person I am. I've also got a lot of contrarian points of view, and I felt like, I've reached a point in my own life. I actually, I got into this field when I was 24, and boom, now I'm 70. It's like, how the heck did that happen? And I feel like, I'm tired of sort of putting up with the status quo and the powers that be and the way AARP makes us think everything is, and the old school gerontologist. So, for example, one of the points I make in the book is that I don't think older people are carrying their weight. Mm-hmm. One of the statistics that rattled me when we came on it is that, we've got 68 million retirees in America. Last year, the average retiree watched 48 hours of television a week. And that same group receives 45% of the total federal budget. And it's like, well, wait a minute. Is that all we're supposed to be when we grow up? Just TV watchers? So I'd love to see more older adults be fathers to their communities, mothers to their neighborhoods, contributors, mentors, elders. And I think we've got a long way to go in terms of creating an entirely new kind of sixth-generation society. And I think that older adults are not carrying their weight.
And I think one of the beauties of the book is that you do make those points, and you also differentiate some of the different groups, and that not everybody's happy in retirement, and some people are really unhappy, and some aren't doing as well. And it's part of why I think it's such an honest book, and you do cover so many things in it. Why the choice of third age? I found it interesting. I think after having read it, I totally get it, but I want the listeners, because it's so interesting when I think about books I've read over the years. In our country, it seemed like third age didn't kind of catch on for a while, and it feels like now we're more ready for it. It's sort of like kind of a coming circle. So I was wondering if you could just talk a little about the reframing retirement and why you view it as the third age and where the term's from. And
yeah, thanks, Dory. So I've always felt that language and the words we use have a lot of impact on how we think and how we frame things. And I may be fooling myself. It may just be that I get carried away with words and they don't really mean that much. But, so for example, my very first book was called Body Mind, as I mentioned. And my publisher said, well, there is no word body mind. Do you mean body and mind? And I said, no, I'm trying to make a point here. Body mind. They're together. They're not separate. I feel proud of that. And then when I left Big Sur, it was finishing my doctorate, and I got asked to head up the first preventative health research project for the elderly in the United States. I just turned 24. A group of us formed a study group to try to see if we can imagine kind of a new medicine and a new mind-body, body-mind kind of approach to health and well-being. And this is way before Dean Ornish and Andy Weil and, kind of Pilates and Bikram Studios. I mean, it was like way before all that. And there was a guy named Stuart Brand that had just created the Whole Earth catalog, for those of you who might be hippies in the audience listening or people from that era. Stuart was a major force, and he took an interest in what we were doing, so he gave us $5,000 so we could file as a not-for-profit. But then we had to come up with a name. So it was a woman named Gay Luce and myself and a couple of other people, and we decided that we'd make up a word, holistic health. By the way, for the record, I thought it should be spelled WHOLISTIC, like whole, like a whole story. And Gay, who have been very taken by Tibetan Buddhism, also she was a science writer, wanted it to be holy, like HOL, and she won. And then I got to watch that phrase kind of take hold. And then, a few years later, I kept trying to figure out what this aging of America looked like. And when I began to look at the demographics and study charts and graphs, and it began to feel to me like a flow. And so I said, it's kind of like an age wave. And that caught on. And then in 1990, I was creating a project on health and aging. And it was designed to have all the major insurers who were trying to better meet the needs of what they were calling seniors. It's not a word I've ever liked, by the way. And we wound up getting 54 insurers involved, and it was 2/3 of all the elderly in the country who were impacted by it. And there was no internet then or email, so I was dictating a letter from the road to my assistant and, welcome to the Alliance for Health and Aging. And she misheard me, and she sent the note out, and it said, welcome to the Alliance for Healthy Aging. And that's where that phrase came from. And then I'll just mention one more. One night I was having dinner with my friend Maggie Kuhn. Maggie was the founder of the Great Panthers. And she was really bemoaning the fact that the word elder didn't have as much prominence as she felt it should have, that we thought of older people as kind of wrinkled babies, or we had this silly word senior, that didn't really catch fire with anyone. So she challenged me. We were speaking at a conference the next day. She just come up with a new word tomorrow for how do we care for older men and women doesn't have the word geriatric in it. So I showed up at breakfast and I said, how about elder care? And she says, I like it. And I said, I like it too. And it stuck. So I'm fascinated by how words can sort of change your point of view or pull attention to something. So living in this retirement world, studying retirement, it's a tricky word because if you look it up in the dictionary, it says retirement, to disappear, to go away, to withdraw. So retirement basically means to be done, to check out, to unwind, to step off the playing field. And, that's kind of how people think about it. And then it got even more confusing as we were doing studies. I'd meet people at a conference and I'd say, what do you do? Well, I'm retired. I said, oh, how do you like all that leisure? What do you mean leisure? I started 3 companies. I said, wait, you said you were retired. Yeah, I was retired, but now I've got a new career. And so what began to happen in my mind over the last decade or two was that the word just, on the one hand, it indicated freedom and kind of the winding up of a core career, but it also implied the end of things, the winding down, the going down the mountain climb, and then all this confusion about second and third and fourth retirements. So here's the story, and I want to give credit where credit is due. It was not my idea. When I was writing Age Wave, I started writing Age Wave, it was my 8th book in 1981, and it took me 9 years to get that darn book done. I thought I was done with it around 1987, and I was speaking at a gerontology conference, and there was a dinner talk, and I was sitting next to Father Charles Fahey, the priest, and I gave this snappy talk, I thought, and I sat down next to him, and I said, well, what'd you think, Father? And he said, well, I don't agree with your whole point of view. And I said, what do you mean? He says, well, if you think the whole purpose of being an older person is to just try to be young for another 30 years or to buy more stuff, I think you're missing the point. And I said, well, okay, teach me. And he said to me, there's this idea in Europe called the third age. And it comes from the educational system. In fact, at that point, Chuck Fahey was running the Third Age Center at Fordham University. He's still alive, by the way. Good man. Must be around 90 today. But there was this idea that there are 3 ages of man, or man and women. And the first age is the first 30 years of life. And up until around 300-400 years ago, that's pretty well all anybody ever got to. There were a few people that lived to 50 or 70, but hardly any. And the first 30 years of life are about, biology, the biological development and learning and mating. And then you have the second age of life from 30 to 60 approximately. And that's kind of where society has been for the last couple of hundred years. The focus is on career and productivity, child rearing. And then usually people die. And, for our grandparents, if they reached 60, that was considered quite an accomplishment. And they thought they might have a couple of years left before their batteries wear out. But today, with the extraordinary breakthroughs in the 20th century in public health and sanitation and antibiotics and refrigeration and self-care and such, you get to be 60, it's a good chance you've got another 30 years in front of you. So there's a whole new stage of life rising up. And to think about it simply as a retiring or a winding down or a being done is mistaken. And so in Age Wave, I actually rewrote the whole book after that dinner with Chuck Fahey. And at the end, in the last chapter, I talked about at some point in the future, we'd see the arrival of a third age, not just meaning that individuals would have a chance to reinvent themselves and continue growing and maybe find a new purpose and identity for themselves if they wished, but that also societies, as they became not youth-dominated, but middle-aged and maturity-dominated, would have a chance to grapple with what that was all about in terms of the marketplace, in terms of politics, in terms of economics, and so on. And so I took the idea from 31 years ago from my previous book and thought that the time was now, that we've reached kind of the whole idea of retirement as we've known it for the last few decades, I think, is becoming obsolete.
Oh, I totally agree. And it may be that now we're ready of viewing kind of lifelong learning, this third age, this, it's kind of that reinventing, kind of what the possibilities and opportunities are for these extra 20, 30, however many years we have.
I want to add a little story because I'm such a fan of your work that here's one of the really kind of interesting things about it all, and hopefully we'll get some questions about this. But so my kids are now 30 and 33, and when they were in high school, there was a whole lot of help given to help people consider that 4-year decision of where to go to college. You would think about, do I want to go to a public school or a private school? Do I want to be in the city? Do I want to be in rural? Do I want to have a big student body or a small student body? Do I want to study liberal arts or engineering? And then you go visit the campuses, and then there's counselors to talk to, and then you're going to have tests taken to figure out where you're a better fit. And then when you get there, there's clubs that you can visit, and maybe you want to get the religious club or the sports club or the choir. And then if you don't like it, you can transfer. And that's for 4 years. And yet people get close to their retirement. Average retirement age right now is about 64. And they've got about 20 to 30 years in front of them. And there is no orientation whatsoever. And people are told, have a good time. And most people are. And I'm not saying this to be a snarky guy. I'm saying this as someone who's studied retirees and older adults for 45 years. Most people are clueless. They think it's a vacation, and then they vacation for a while, then they don't know what to do with themselves. Or they think they're they're sick of work, and then when they finish working, they kind of miss the action, the productivity. Or they may be widowed or divorced, and they don't quite know how to fall in love again. Or they maybe have a great idea when they're 70 and are thinking, am I too old to be an entrepreneur? Or what if when you were young, you loved to play the drums or the piano or the guitar, and you weren't very good, but who cares? I mean, now that you're 65, if you want to play music, buy an instrument, So there's all these possibilities, and we don't really have the books or the summer camp or the retirement orientation course to help people explore what all the possibilities are. And by the way, that's partly what we tried to do with this book, but it's what you do with your books. I mean, how does one be a couple when one is retired if your whole game has changed? It used to be she or he went to work and you and her or him did that, and now it's all of a sudden different. And if the kids leave the home and your primary reason for being a grown-up was to keep the kids going in the right direction, now they're off on their own. Well, what do you do? So it's this wide open territory that could be a time of great purpose and reinvention and fun and contribution, or it could be a big waste of time. And I think it's a lot up to us to help create the possibilities for what people could do in that new stage of life.
I agree 100%. And I think your book, I really do encourage people to read it, because I think it, along with, other things that are there, get people thinking in some different ways. So I know there are a number of ways that you've kind of looked at patterns and attitudes and aspirations, priorities, needs, how they shift. So can you talk a little about, because I think that your research has informed ways that you've kind of divided out. You kind of talk about segments, and I thought it might be helpful for listeners to just even the 4 different life.
Yeah, and that was sort of I became a little bit of a mutant, because I started out initially went to school to be a physicist, and then I became kind of a hippie psychologist, and then I became kind of a gerontologist, but then I got really weary of the not-for-profit sector and tried to make my way in the world of business. But every one of those different playing fields, there's ways they go about things. So, for example, the aging services field, very heartful, very compassionate, primarily has concerned itself with the vulnerable elderly, which is about 20% of the population, and have almost nothing to do with the rest of all the aging population. The business community, on the other hand, got all sorts of sophisticated means by which they segment, they disaggregate, they figure out, what's this group, what's that group, what does this person need, what does that person prefer. For example, maybe 20 years ago now, we did one of our first studies, and it occurred to us that we would do a study to segment retirees based on the lives they were living. So we looked around to see what other ones existed. By the way, we were doing work at that time with Guinness Beer in Dublin, Ireland. They have 37 kinds of beer drinkers. So they break their consumer down into 37 different categories, clear as a bell categories. And, you deal with almost any business, and they know that there's, 5 types of golf players or 7 types of homeowners. But in the aging field, everything is all kind of jumbled up together, who's poor, who's rich, and who's on this program or that program. So we thought, let's see if we can find the other studies that have segmented retirees by how they were living their lives. And it turns out there was none. And we said, okay, let's have a try at that. And we did this study in partnership with a company named Sun America. And we arrived at the idea, database, it wasn't just making things up in our drinking Kool-Aid and making things up. And we came out with the realization that there was one segment, we called them ageless explorers. They were having a great time in their maturity. They had planned well, they were financially secure, and they didn't view this as kind of the end of their life. They viewed it as a new beginning. And they were pretty turned on. And there was another group. We call them the comfortably content. They were also doing well in retirement. By the way, they had also planned and saved. They were kind of traditional. They thought retirement was a time to relax and vacation. Nope, no judgment there. That was the first group. They wanted to try new things, go back to college, reinvent themselves. The second group just wanted to relax and enjoy their fine. But then there was another group that we call the live for todays. And they were pretty cool. They had tried new things. They loved movies and theater and interesting people. What's the problem? They had always lived for today. Why is that a problem? Because they were broke. And all of a sudden they find themselves in retirement realizing that the life they had been living was a little too immediate gratification oriented, and now they were in trouble. So they were not so comfortable in retirement, and lots of regrets that they had been not responsible financially, they hadn't saved enough, hadn't really planned, and they were going to be struggling, and they're probably going to have to work. By the way, the ageist explorers wanted to work, didn't care if they were making money or not, they just wanted to stay in the game. The live for today's, we're going to have to work. And that is a totally different state of mind as if you want to work versus it's one thing to want to help out at the kids' school. It's another thing to have to bag groceries. Then there was a fourth group, which we named the worried strugglers. And they were having a really rough time with it. These are people with very little financial resources, very little support networks, and struggling with health. And when we studied this group, we thought, wow. So we began asking thousands of people, which of these 4 segments, asking people who were younger, Dory, you do retirement coaching and all, ask 50-year-olds, which would you rather be? An ageless explorer, a comfortably content, a live for today, or a worried struggler? And everybody picks either ageless explorer or comfortably content. But then we could reverse engineer these 4 segments. And what we realized was a lot of the word strugglers were heading there when they were 25. Mm-hmm. You know, it's really easy to blame the world and society and hard luck on things. But, you know, honestly, a lot of the choices we make and the discipline we either have or don't have along the way puts us where we wind up. Not always. You know, there's bad things that happen to wonderful people. There's no question. But overall, we make choices all along the way that impacts how our future selves are going to live. Let me add one other cut to this. It's not as simple as simply, you know, sectoring or segmenting people. We were doing a project with Ameriprise, and they said, what would you like to do that no one else has ever done? And I said, we'll give you a bunch of money. What can you figure out? By the way, one of the nice things about working in the for-profit sector is that people have a great deal of money to spend. In the not-for-profit sector, there's never any money to spend. You know, I've got friends who work for wonderful organizations, and every year they're scratching their way to some basic budget versus give me $1 million so we can try to envision the future. So I had been in my 20s. I was had the good fortune of doing work with Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. And Elizabeth was a little bit of a kooky woman, especially at the end of her life. She kind of went insane. But she had come up with these really brilliant ideas about that grief and death and dying. It's not just an on-off switch. There are stages. You know, for example, grief, denial, then anger, then sadness, then acceptance. And that had impressed me, you know, the idea that made sense. So I thought, well, nobody's ever done that with retirement. We talk about people who are not yet retired and then people who are retired, as though that handles it. So we did a massive study where we decided we were going to come up with the 5 stages of retirement. And so we surveyed thousands and thousands and thousands of people. And by the way, all of this is in the book, as all this is in what retirees want. But just to give you the headline, yeah, there's people maybe 15 or 20 years before retirement. Let's call that the imagination phase. They're not really taking retirement seriously, but they're thinking about it a little bit. And if they're smart, they're starting to put money aside, because best time to financially prepare yourself for retirement is like 30 years in advance, not a weekend in advance. Now, it's not like going away on a vacation where you pack your bags last minute. So there's the imagination. Then there's the anticipation. Right around 5 years before people retire, they start to really think about it. Where might I like to live, and would I like to take a trip and maybe spend more time by the grandkids, and do I want to stop working, or would I like to keep working, and how do I do that? And then there becomes the liberation period when people actually retire. And we interviewed thousands of people who were within several years of just having retired, and it was like a honeymoon. People said that they're free, they're liberated, they've never been so happy, they have no pressure, they can sleep late, they can go fishing when they want, they can read books, you know, they can go to porn sites on the internet. I mean, all kinds of stuff. And then we said, well, how long does that liberation phase last? 18 months is all. Mm-hmm. And then there's a reorientation phase, and that's when people really hunker down and say, what the heck am I doing with my life? Do I like being retired? Do I have friends, you know? Is my health good enough? Am I frightened about the cost of things? And for about half the population, that reorientation phase is good, because they're feeling, I got control of this. I like retirement. In fact, I like it a lot. But about half of people are depressed or anxious, not satisfied. And then there's a final stage of retirement, usually 15 to 20 years into it, we call it reconciliation. That's when people try to come to terms with who they've been. What is the life I've lived? Was it a good life? Not a good life? Is it too late for me to ask for forgiveness? Can I make a better version of myself? Can I leave a legacy? Can I look after my loved ones in ways that perhaps a grown-up should do? And so just these simple things like taking something called retirement or a stage of life, called ending work, and having the resources and the intent to try to make it smarter and more clarified, and more able to do something with. Because if you're selling Mercedes and you're targeting retirees, I got news for you, you're a lot better off aiming at ageless explorers and comfortably content. On the other hand, if you're selling med-sup, or you're selling, some access to long-term care, there's other segments that might be more likely audiences.
Which is the beauty of your book, in that you constantly kind of refer to the different stage that a person may be at, as well as sort of the active or not so active in lifestyle choices. And so that's where I think it's so helpful for industries, corporations, marketing people, as well as entrepreneurs to kind of think about, this maybe is an area that hasn't been dealt with yet. Let me put my energy there. Because you break other things down. I just want to, so people get a sense of what else is in the book, because you also break down little categories of different types of working retirees. I wonder if you could just mention that, and then I'm going to start integrating other people's.
We got to all appreciate that the idea of working retirees is kind of like confusing.
Right.
I mean, I can't, there's a lot of people that specialize in caregiving or in housing or in whatever, but being a specialist in aging and retirement, it's kind of like, I keep meeting people who are retired but working, and it's like, well, what does the word mean? So let me mention a little bit about what we try to figure out. I'm going to come to the right place in that. Yeah, so it turns out that 72% of boomers say they want to work in retirement. Well, that was kind of interesting. Do they want to work forever? No, maybe another 3-5 years. And then we said to them, well, would you like to work just the way you're working now? And I'm sure some of the listeners on this call can relate to this personally. People said, kind of, but I don't want to work as hard. Well, what do you mean? We asked people. They said, yeah, maybe work 3-4 days a week or 8 months a year. Who said that you got to work like a nut and then have nothing but time off? Why not have a balance? Better balance. That's what people were saying to us. Like to work some and play some. Like to play more than I ever have, and like to work less, but I'd like to keep it going, either because I need a little extra money coming in or because it's kind of fun. And then, big surprise, we asked boomers, oh, so you mean you like to work less but at the same kind of job? Half of them said yes. The other half said no, I want to do something totally different. And I thought, wow, isn't that the beginning of talk about a revolution? Because I got to tell you, my grandparents, my grandmother was a homemaker. My grandfather was an automobile mechanic. When he retired, he wasn't thinking of becoming a lawyer or opening up a candy store. They were done. My parents tried their hand at making a little retail business in New Jersey, and they did just fine. They weren't thinking of reinventing themselves. Now, keep in mind, that's a boomery sort of thing. We went to college and we changed majors more than people ever had before. And then we relocated more than people ever had before. We had a higher divorce rate. We changed partners and families more than people have. We even changed religions more than people ever had before. And so previous generations, when they became older, they were pretty set in their ways. Boomers have been changing themselves continually. And so, by the way, that has a great opportunity for community colleges, because if you want to try something new, you got to learn how to do that. And right now, most of our education is front-ended, teach young people stuff, and older people, they're old dogs, they don't learn new tricks. That's a big mistake. So relearning. And then we pushed it even further, and it's in the work chapter in the book. We said, well, what are the different kinds of workers in retirement? And there were 4. And by the way, these are all not just Ken Dykewald and Robert Morrison speculating. These were substantial bodies of research with thousands of representative samples in the United States, and we did them in other countries as well. So one group are the builders. They want to keep going. They've been growing something, a company, a business, a church, a charity, and they have no intention of slowing down. Warren Buffett is a builder. He's been building his expertise and his investment skills, and he's not looking to stop just because he reached an age. Then we have another group, contributors. These are people that primarily what drives them is, I guess, is my friend Mark Friedman, with whom I had a great discussion yesterday, an encore career. So whatever it is you did, what you'd like to do now in retirement is something for the public good. Maybe it's for pay, maybe it's volunteer, but you want to be a contributor. You're at a point in your life where that matters to you more than anything. Then we have balancers. These are people who need some money but like leisure, and so they're trying to work in a way that gives them the freedom of time and experience to do a lot of what they want and also work some. So it's sort of like changing got a lazy Susan where you got what's offered on the table, and it's like changing it around a little bit. And then you got the earners. The earners need to work. And so you got people working in retirement, and it's not so much only about contributing or balancing or building. They need to work, and they don't have much money. They're hurting. They're frightened, and they might have to work till the end of their lives. And each of those groups, if you are offering jobs or benefits or vacations or public programs, you treat them differently. They're different.
That's part of what I think is so unique in your book, to be able to differentiate that, but also think of, kind of what some of the underpinnings are, that we've got this health, underlying mess. We have ageism, we have some sectors that are more welcoming and valuing elders and some, that aren't. And you do hit upon a lot of that. Maybe you want to comment, and then I'm going to shift to these other questions.
Okay. Yeah. Well, what I found was that, I had two great mentors in my career. One was Maggie Kuhn, founder of the Grey Panthers, and the other was Bob Butler, who was founder of the National Institutes on Aging. And Bob coined the word ageism and another word, gerontophobia, which he characterizes as a psychiatric disorder back in the 1960s. And so we can't, there's a lot of people today that are writing books and taking credit for, pointing out ageism, and that's great, but they're not the inventors of that concern, but they're more promoters, which is good. Bob pointed out that ageism is like pernicious. It's like everywhere. Some examples. You see TV ads. And we call out some of the examples in the book, and I'm sure those companies are not happy, where older people are made to look like buffoons or jerks, and it's like, well, who thinks that's funny? It's just mean. And we see other examples where even older people are the primary buyers. By the way, people over 50 control 70% of all the wealth in America. So they're pretty well the number one buyers on like almost everything. And then you see a lot of campaigns and a lot of marketing and billboards. There's no people over 50, and I'm just like, come on, what's that about? And then you see ageism that's, professional aging organizations that portray older people as all vulnerable and as all struggling, and some are, but they're not all. And then you see technology firms. I was brought up to do a big program for Amazon last year. I read them the Riot Act, because you go to their website, they've changed it for Alexa, and they've got about 40 or 50 little videos that show all the wonderful ways in which this new technology can help you have a more wonderful life. And there was nobody over 50 in any of them. And that's ageism. And, even in our language, now I'm going to throw you here with what I'm about to say, Dory. But if we were really comfortable with our maturity, we'd be proud of being elders. And by the way, I feel that way. And I feel like, I worked hard to become 70. I've been to so many rodeos in life, and mom and dad, I was with them when they both died. I watched my kids grow up. I mean, I'm not a kid anymore. And so I'm not looking to be a young person. I'd like to be youthful. So I'm proud of my age. But if I were to meet you or most people, folks on the call, and I'd say, hey, I haven't seen you for a while. Nice to see you. Boy, are you looking old today. People would be offended. But if we said, oh, you look so young, people would say, thank you. So even our language is ageist. our medical system, this may surprise you, but our medical system, Medicare particularly, was not designed to help older people be healthy. It was designed to make sure doctors were paid. And it is not very good at keeping older people healthy. You know, there's 33 countries in the world that have a higher life expectancy than ours, even some third world countries. Not only that, but our health span doesn't even come close to our lifespan. So we have a decade of illness and disability and suffering at the end of our lives. We have 126 medical schools. There's only 16 departments of geriatrics. And Medicare continues to pay doctors who are not competent at dealing with our moms and dads. And organizations like AARP do nothing about it. And I think to myself, so we have ageism that's obvious and other dimensions of it that are kind of hidden, but it's not good. You know, honestly, maybe if I'm a little more unplugged at this stage in my life, but the second chapter in the book, I decided to come up with a name for that chapter, and the publisher said, "Oh, you can't say that." And I said, "Yes, I can." The name of the second chapter, do you have the book in front of you by any chance? Dory?
I have my Kindle here. Hold on.
Second chapter, the title is...
Wait, you better say it. Oh, right. Oh, yeah, ageism sucks. Right. I have that right.
Ageism sucks. It does suck. Why can't I say that?
Yeah.
And, there have been so many people for 50 years now, kind of saying, let's cut it out. Let's treat older adults with respect. And those of us who are older, let's demand it. And it still hasn't happened. So, yeah, these are all different dimensions of this transformation from a youthful world to one in which people have the benefit and the advantage of living long lives. And so how do we reshape our medical system, our marketplace, our thinking, our relationships, our education to be more accommodating of longer lives? And that to me was the challenge of this book.
And I think you really bring up those issues in such really powerful ways. I mean, I think that I recommend it. I want to start integrating questions. I have a whole bunch more of my own. Okay. But let's see. Norman says, Norman did have one question, which doesn't have to do with this content, but he does want to know why the price of the Kindle is almost as expensive as the hardcover. He just wondered about that. You don't have to comment on that now, but yeah, but it is true because when I ended up ordering the Kindle because my other copy hasn't come yet, I realized it was like $1 difference or something like that. If I were the boss of all things, I would make it far less because there's no book and there's no distribution involved. It's just digital. But sorry about that. I don't have any control over that. Okay. Bill from Maine says, would you list some of the ways, methods, actions, etc., that older adults can carry their own weight? Because you started out by saying, you don't think, you're carrying that weight. So he'd like you to just elaborate on that if you would. First of all, thank you, Bill. Yeah, and by the way, I say these things as my own personal opinion, as somebody who's been thinking about this for 45 years and someone who is now 70 myself. So I don't know. I'm not saying I'm right. I'm not saying it's the best way to think about things, but I'm gonna be honest. How might older people carry more of their own weight? A couple of things. First of all, older people should do a better job of taking care of their health. That a third of the elderly are overweight. More than a half of the elderly are overweight. A third are obese. Only about half of older adults comply with their medications. Only about half exercise regularly. And it's like, we can't expect the healthcare system to take your walk each day for you. And we know that with proper exercise, sleep, rest, healthy diet, people will stay healthier longer. And I've been chagrined that far too few older people actually do that. Second, I am troubled that only 24% of the elderly population volunteered last year. And the average elder volunteer spent 2.3 hours doing that. Now, I think that's fabulous that those people volunteered a couple hours a week. But in the next 20 years, the boomers, retirees, are going to have 2.5 trillion hours of free time.
And as I mentioned, the average retiree watches 48 hours of television a week, which is like 2,800 minutes or something. So what would I like to see? I'd like to see more. I'm going to make this and then one more point, Bill. I'd like to see more older adults volunteering. And I don't necessarily mean just menial labor. I mean volunteering with the top of their skills. I mean, if you've been a marketer, help some young people start their business. If you've been a school teacher, get involved in helping young people and kids in the city learn about money and finance and living good lives. If you've been, if you've been a dog trainer, help people, manage their home life better. If you've been a doc, teach people about wellness. If you've been a accountant, teach a course. I just think that the world has never had more wisdom and experience than we currently have among today's elders. And a lot of elders are hoarding that. And I know that there could be more programs and more activities to make it easier to contribute. But that's one area. The next thing is that our older population, and I'm going to get edgy here, but I feel like, why not? People over 75 in America are 80% white. They've always been 80% white. The boomers are 76% white. But then you go down to Gen Zers and it's less than 50% white. So older people don't have much contact with young people. So if I were to say to the average 70-year-old, hey, what's your favorite TikTok performer? What's that? Tell me what you think about FOMO. What? Explain why Kanye West is so interesting. I don't know who he is. What's the deal with telemedicine? Not sure I understand how it works. So you've got a lot of older people who may be involved with their children and grandchildren, but are probably not that involved with people from different racial backgrounds or different faiths or different sexual persuasions. And you got a lot of young people who feel that older people have kind of tuned them out. And you know what? They have. And I think that we who are elders need to be the best of us and the best we've ever been and give more of ourselves, our skills, our knowledge, our kindness, our compassion. When I heard Greta Thunberg, and I'm not a Democrat and I'm not a Republican, so I'm not looking to be put into one of those categories. But when I heard Greta Thunberg talking about how the climate and the environment was kind of in bad shape, I thought, she's talking to me. And my generation has allowed that on our watch. When George Floyd had that guy killing him, and I thought, whoa, we've kind of allowed some of that on our watch, So I think we who are the elders, rather than thinking, hey, we've got to pass, all we got to do is kick back, watch TV, and make sure our own family is okay, I think we have a responsibility, not only to all those people in our own family, but to our communities and to the future, that there will be children born after our time, and the way we leave things will impact them. And so I think eldership and elderhood needs to emerge.
Well, I so strongly support that. I think you're absolutely right. Let's see. There are so many good questions here. Well, in line with what sort of I commented at the beginning, and I know you do comment in the book about you submitted the manuscript in January, and then you wrote the foreword in April, and here we are in July now with COVID still. And so Kendall from Arlington says, Ken, how do your findings change with the COVID awareness? And how does your work apply to people who come from disadvantaged communities? What advice can you give the chronically disenfranchised?
Yeah, that's a very powerful question. Let me be respectful of my answer. First, let me say, and I'm not allowed to say more until next Monday, that for the last 9 months, I've been overseeing a massive survey of all Americans and Canadians with regard to how we're coping with COVID relative to retirement and longevity. And we've done that in partnership with a company named Edward Jones. And it's starting on the 4th. If you go to the AgeWave website or just type in my name or Google Edward Jones, you'll see the results, and the report will be available for free to everyone. So I can't mention exactly what's in that, except let me say this. Generally speaking, older men and women are doing okay during COVID. they're doing better than younger people. Now, they are more at risk for this disease, and there's more vulnerability because of their immune systems and compromising health situations. But young people who are losing their jobs, who can't pay their bills, who have no medical insurance, whose kids are home and they're trying to school them while they're also trying to do their work, are coming unglued. Older people are not worried about, retirees are not worried about getting fired because they're not working. They don't have to lay off 27 people and feel a heartache from doing that. And last year, the average American receiving Social Security got $18,000 a year. It was $31,000 per couple. And the market value of a Medicare policy is $11,000 a year. So if you're an older couple, whatever state you're in, you've got about a $50,000 safety net that younger people do not have. So I first want to say that older people are actually proving to be a little bit more secure than younger generations. They also have more resilience. We live in a world where we so glorify youth, we forget that one of the benefits of being an older person is that you've been knocked down and you've gotten up lots of times. You've seen death, you've seen loss, you've seen craziness, maybe never as much this craziness, and so young people are confused and disrupted and terrified, and older people have got more emotional intelligence and more fortitude and more resilience. I will tell you, though, that this gets to the ability to segment, that if you step away from the idea of all older people and you look at people over 75, and then you even clarify it a little more and you look at people over 75 of color having a really rough ride, particularly single women over 75 of color where the poverty rate is 50% and the access to health care is crummy. And the access to good education and nourishment and support is questionable. And so there are segments of our population, and they're not all old. I'm looking at a lot of young people today who can't afford to go to college, or people who've lost their jobs and can't afford their apartments. So I don't necessarily divide it up by older people are the worst situation, but there are pockets sizable. About 15 to 20% of our elder population is having a horrible time right now. And frankly, if it were up to me, I would double down. I would give those elders who are needy more support, more help, more dignity, more opportunity. And frankly, there's a whole lot of people between 65 and 70 that are doing quite well, and they don't need quite as much. So if it were up to me, I would be a little bit like the segmenting. There are some who need more, and I'd give them more because they really need help. Made worse by COVID because of the way this horrible virus is knocking people down who not only are in skilled nursing facilities, and many of those people are in on Medicaid, and half of them have got Alzheimer's or related dementias. And unfortunately, you've got the vulnerable caring for the vulnerable. So a lot of the people who are suffering from COVID are very old, and they're struggling, and they're in institutions where the people working there are themselves maybe having two jobs, living in close quarters with friends and relatives who also are working service jobs. And I just don't think I realize we've given great regard and respect to the nurses and doctors in the hospitals, and they deserve it. But I think those care workers and those people working in skilled nursing facilities and assisted living and home care, we ought to be giving those people the protective gear and giving them more support and respect. Otherwise, the elders they look after are going to get the worst of it.
Oh, you're so right in relation to that. I think it ties into Peggy from Arlington's question, I think, of what are ways or how can we help our current society provide some new structures or provide these opportunities and reinforce, some of what you're talking about so that older people can both carry their weight but also live and survive and thrive.
I'll mention a few, and Peggy, thanks. And the whole book is filled with these ideas, so I'm going to only cover as much as I can in this fun call with Dory, but I encourage you to pick up a copy of the book. And again, I'm donating all of my earnings to the American Society on Aging, so this is me not trying to make money on it. It's more me saying I done a lot of work to try to provide some of these ideas, but here's a few. First of all, we need an elder corps. We need an elder corps. Like the Peace Corps, we need the opportunity for older men and women who want to give a couple hours or a day a week to help kids and to help their communities and to help others. We need to make it easy. We need to make it maybe even compensated with some kind of benefits, but we need to take fuller advantage of our elder population. Second, we've got to have a medical system that's competent. We need to have a medical system where people are skilled and trained and expert on dealing with the needs of older adults, or else they're going to botch it up. Third, we need to be more clear on how we help people manage their finances. I'll give you an example. So, I've written 17 books. I'm Mr. Agewave. I'm a reasonably clever fellow. I get a Medicare bill every month. And on the top of the document, it says, this is your Medicare premium bill. And on the other side of the top, it says, this is not a bill. Now, I can't understand it at all. In fact, I got to tell you, I'll honestly declare this. I do not understand Medicare. You start talking to me about Part A and Part B and donut holes, and my eyes glaze over. And same with financial services, 401ks, 403bs, defined benefit, defined contribution. We have created a world in which the financial dynamic, both in the private sector and the government, is incomprehensible. And yet we tell people that they're responsible. You make up your own mind about whether you want to work or whether you want to take your Social Security when you're 65. You make up your own mind about whether you can afford a Medicare sub-policy. And we don't educate people, and we allow it to be so confusing. It's outrageous. What else do we need? I think we need more intergenerational interdependencies, more sharing. We talk about the sharing society, and everybody thinks it's so you take an Uber car. How come we all live alone? How come we only have roommates our same age? Why don't we have people, knock on the door in your apartment building and make some friends with that retired person there and adopt a grandchild and adopt a grandparent? And we could all do better at creating a more integrated, multiracial, multi-ethnic community. And I think we're all either uncomfortable or lazy. And we've not had a leader, unfortunately, who has called for that, who's called for the generations of America to find ways to be more helpful and useful. And I'll say my last thing on that. There's a lot of buzz in the capitalistic marketplace about everybody wanting to be youthful. I've concluded that as we age, we ought to focus more on being useful, than youthful. That there is so much help needed in families and communities and in neighborhoods, kindness and compassion and skills and discipline and concern and empathy, that if we're waiting for the government to provide that, I'm not so sure we're going to see that right now. If we're waiting for young people to carry all that, I'll give you one last example as a story, and I know you might have another question or two. So last year I spoke at a conference, and the other speaker was Harrison Ford, the actor. Mm-hmm. It's before COVID. And I'd never met Harrison Ford. He's obviously, a matinee figure. He's been in some great roles. And he gave a speech on climate. And he talked about how we got to get all the young people planting trees to save the planet. And everybody cheered. And then I had a private meeting with him afterwards, which was kind of cool. And, nice to meet you. I love Raiders of the Lost Ark. I love Star Wars. Great to meet him. And I said, this thing about having all the kids plant the trees, I said, we got 68 million American retirees right now, and nobody's tasked them with anything. Why don't you get them planting the trees? In fact, worldwide, there's 1 billion retirees. If we had even a small fraction, 100 million retirees planting trees in whose shade they'd never sit, that'd make a different statement, and a statement that the world needs. We need elders doing more. And he said to me, he looked at me and he smiled and he says, I'd never thought of that. So we need some imagination with regard to this longevity revolution and this third age. We need some creative, imaginative, courageous people who are coming up with new connections, new ideas, and driving them forward. And then we need a media who, instead of just, being WrestleMania and talking about, we hate you and they hate us, I think we need to build a new world out of all of this. And I think that there's a massive role that our elders can and should play for everyone's benefit.
Hear, hear. I think that's so true. Kathy from Raleigh says, I really agree that boomers should be doing more of this, volunteer more, or whatever. However, it's much more difficult than it sounds, especially if you want to contribute your higher level skills. And she said she wishes you'd look into this and facilitate even one kind of working national solution. For example, she says at least in her area, you can't teach an accounting class at a community college unless you have a master's degree, even if you have a CPA and experience. I think what she's talking about partly is it's not just the ageism, but it's the bureaucracies or the hierarchies, I guess, that make it so difficult for people to use their skills and offer them.
Yeah, Kathy, we do give examples in the book of programs that do work, and there are many. There just needs to be more, and they need to be smoother so people can glide in and out without it being a big headache. And I also think we need to put more peer pressure because there's a whole lot of older people, unlike yourself, who aren't even trying to be helpful. And honestly, my wife doesn't like it when I say this, but kind of shame on us. If you've lived a life and you've got all this time and all these vast knowledge and insights and you're hoarding it versus thinking, okay, I really want to give some of this to other people, then it's a combination. Everybody's got to meet in the middle.
Yeah. Good point. A couple more. I'm not going to be able to ask all the questions, but I think you've touched on many, which have been the intergenerational. Paula from Woburn asks, given that everybody probably wants to be in your first two categories of retirees, what ideas or suggestions do you have for those that are in the fourth struggling group so that they can try to change course early enough so that it could really make a difference for a different outcome?
Yeah, that's a wonderful question because, I'm a science fiction nut, and I sometimes think of this like science fiction. So there's like the me now. Okay, I'm living right now in this year, crazy year, but let's assume there's a me 10 years from now, and I hope there is, and I hope there's my wife 10 years from now. We're still together, which would be wonderful. And if I don't save money now, if I get $1 and I take all that $1 and spend it today, then 10 years from now, the me in the future is going to be having a terrible time of it. And that me in the future is going to be saying, what were you thinking? Why weren't you thinking about the me in the future? So it's a matter of thinking not just for now. It's thinking about you got a future self. It's almost like a future garden, and you need to nourish it. You need to water it. You need to protect it. So from the financial side, by the way, very early in the call, I mentioned how Stuart Brand had given me $5,000 to start this project. So the Whole Earth Catalog just had their 50th anniversary, and I was asked to speak. And I said to my wife, it's kind of a crazy thing. I'd like to pay Stuart Brand back now that I've had success in my life, that $5,000. So I said to my financial advisor, hey, $5,000 given to me in 1974, how much would it be worth today? And he did a few calculations. He says, well, if we put it in some kind of an index fund and, assuming, the inflation and a little bit of this, a little bit of that, it'd be worth $645,000. Now, I did not pay Stuart Brand $645,000. But I thought, holy moly. So I called my kids up right away and I said, whoa, guys, take some money and park it, man. Invest it, put it in some kind of a decent financial package because 20, 30 years from now, it's going to be worth a fortune. We don't do that enough. Now, it's hard to make changes when you're already older. But if you're already older, there are some things you can do. One of the best, there was a really futuristic show in the 1980s. No, it's not the Jetsons. Golden Girls. What do those women do? They shared. They had 4 or 5 women sharing a house. Many of us could do far better with our finances if we shared more. Why does everybody need to have their own apartment, their own house? First of all, it's lonely, it's expensive, and especially during things like COVID, you could really get isolated. Sharing. Also, downshifting. Maybe there's a place you could relocate that was less expensive. Maybe you could live near the grandkids. Maybe you could find a job, even if it was part-time. So there are ways to course correct, and we lay them out in the book. But it takes a little bit of work if you get started and you're already in your 60s or 70s. Laying down tracks for your later life self when you're younger gives you the most running room.
Which I think becomes important then in terms of the intergenerational of helping children or grandchildren really think about it now, as well as trying to make shifts for oneself.
Yeah.
There are also some wonderful just stories and comments of people and how they're trying to negotiate their life, but I don't think that time-wise we're going to be able to do that. Ken, why don't you let people know how to get your book? And then I'd love you if, there are so many areas. I do want to say that the book is laid out so well in terms of each chapter, focuses on some of these different areas, including, as Ken mentioned, the second chapter, which is Ageism Sucks, but it's about the housing, about finances, about health, caregiving, purpose, legacy. It's just, it really is holistic. And I know it's spelled with the H instead of the W, but it's holistic too, helping us be our best selves. So why don't you let people know how to get a copy of your book?
Yeah, it's, it used to be, you'd say go to your local bookstore, but I think most of those are closed. So whatever website you might choose to buy books, Kindle or Amazon, it's right there. What Retirees Want, a holistic view of life's third age. It's available now. Yeah, and also my company's name is AgeWave. AGEWAVE, and we've got a website, and all of the studies we've ever done, we post for free on our website, so that's available. And there's also links to various talks I've done and other sessions in case people are curious to explore some more of the way I look at things. But I guess I'd like to say, as we're sort of winding up, that I think we're at the beginning of a new frontier. People often think that what's new is tech, and my wife wears a device on her wrist, and so it can tell her whether she slept well or not. And, people think it's all about tech. I think the new frontier is what we're going to do with the rest of our lives and how we can be a 65-year-old with purpose and how we can get fit again at 70 if we've kind of lost our way and how we can make friends with people 50 years younger than us. And I think that this is the new frontier. And so we're struggling to come up with new pathways and new paths to all of this, but that's what it is to be on the frontier. And, I'd like to feel that I've been trying, at least in my 45 years in the field, to kind of keep trying to look ahead and figure out how do we get from here to there. And not only how can companies do a better job, but how can each of us do a better job? So hopefully this book and other things that I do, and frankly, keep an eye out next week for this big Edward Jones study release. And then I'll also say in October, I'm in the middle of creating a new PBS special on all of this. So
fabulous.
It seems to me, in the last few weeks, everybody's sort of, plus COVID is just so scary and so frightening and such a bummer that I think people are looking more for, okay, is there something I can do? Is there some way I can make my life feel better? And there's plenty of ways, and that's what I've been trying to focus on.
And I think you've done an awesome job with, as I said, I recommend the book. I just think it's fabulous, and it brings together so much with the research and with the ideas that you have. And I really just want to underscore the simple kind of thing that you said too, which is be proud of our age. I know I'm telling everybody that I'm 74. I did a TEDx a few years ago, and I remember at the beginning I stood up and said, I'm 70 and I'm proud of it. Yeah. But I think, we need to feel proud of who we are and the perspective and wisdom and confront some of that internalized ageism too, of just recognizing that, and that was the other part of your book that I like so much too, that even with those struggling, people really were talking about the 70, this stage of life being the best years because of that perspective and, even with chronic health conditions and all of that. And I just think it's important to keep that in perspective.
Agreed.
Well, thank you so much for being here and just sharing your work, your wisdom. I mean, you really are a national treasure in terms of all of the work you've been doing and how articulate you are, and and people listen to you, and so it's wonderful seeing you out there and integrating and reintegrating and doing all these things. So thank you. Stay well and safe.
Same to you. Same to all your listeners. Thank you guys for calling in.
You've been listening to Revolutionize Your Retirement Radio with Dr. Dorian Mintzer. To learn more about the resources mentioned on today's show, listen to past episodes, or download our free retirement transition guide, visit revolutionizeyourretirementradio.com.